And we are joined by 5 exceptional guests today, and they're now going to say hello to you briefly, but then they're going to spend most of the rest of our time together sharing a lot more. But to start, let's hear from Janine and Aileen at Fair Count.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here today. I'm Dr. Janine Abrams-McLean, and I'm the president at Fair Count, and I will kick it over to Aileen.
Hello, I'm Aileen Loy, and I'm the volunteer coordinator over at Fair Count. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. Good. And next
we have Abdul from the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition, also known as YBLOC.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. My name is Abdul Dasunmu. I'm the founder and chief strategist of the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition. I am based in Dallas, Texas, and I want to thank Rachel and Crystal for thinking of me and for convening this really great conversation.
Of course. Thanks so much for coming. And last but not least, we have Becky and Andrew, who work together on Democracy.
Hey, I'm Becky Bullard. I'm the founder and CEO of Democracy. We curate events and create content that makes democracy sexy so more people do it. And I was so honored to be involved in this program, and it was such a thrill to work with Andrew.
And that's me. Hi, I'm Andrew. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm coming to this work from being born into the Southern labor movement and then working in the arts as an artist and a curator and a programmer, and then having kind of an abrupt shift into politics, where I was chief of staff of New Georgia Project and New Georgia Project Action Fund. And then kind of this work felt like it was really bringing all of that together.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much again to all of our panelists for being here. And then thank you everyone else for coming and attending today. We're so happy to have you. And before we hear more from these amazing artistic activists, we're going to share a little bit more about the Center for Artistic Activism. And so we help people use their creativity and culture to affect power and build creative campaigns that win.
Yeah, and we work through these 5 wonderful guests through Unstoppable Voters, which is our expansive program that brings more creativity and innovation to protecting the freedom to vote in the United States. And we do this by working with organizations and individuals, leading them through workshops, creating and sharing detailed research and resources, and supporting wildly original campaigns. And since we started in 2020, we've worked with over 80 organizations and over 900 individuals doing lots of training, supporting lots of projects, and reaching millions across the country.
And so with all of that experience, what we want to talk about what we've really seen that works in voting activism, and that's what we're going to dive into today. And so we're going to start with a quick video of our 6 key takeaways from last year's election season, and it's one of my new favorite videos at the center, so I hope you enjoy it.
This giant whale got people out to vote in 2022. How? It was part of Unstoppable Voters, which supported dozens of organizations across the United States to mobilize voters to the polls in record numbers. What did we learn works? From giant whale kites and our other artistic activism campaigns? Center celebration. Hope and joy. Use mystery,
Be sexy.
whimsy, and surprise. Create irresistible imagery. Make it youth-friendly. Make it personal.
I can feel help.
Experiment.
They looted our freedoms and gave us price tags.
And refine. Unstoppable Voters, helping you bring more creativity, innovation, and impact to make sure every vote counts.
And with that introduction, we're going to pass it over to Abdul of Y Block, whose work was heavily featured in that video, to talk especially about two of those takeaways about centering celebration, hope, and joy, and making it personal.
Excellent. Well, I'm not sure I can follow the video because the video was really, really great. But I'm honored to share a little bit more about the work that we did at Y Block and some of the lessons we learned along the way. First, a little bit about Y Block and my own journey in launching the organization. The Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition is a civic organizing platform for young Black lawyers and law students committed to building power in Black communities. And our motivation in launching our movement was really understanding the critical moment that we are in as far as inclusive democracy is concerned, and understanding the important role that lawyers and Black lawyers in particular have played throughout history in aiding the development of inclusive democracy. We often talk at Y Block about Thurgood Marshall, and of course, everyone knows the great legal line Thurgood Marshall, and everyone knows the case that he's most known for, Brown versus the Board of Education. But he also argued a number of very important voting rights and democracy cases, including one in Texas where I'm based called Smith versus Allwright. And this is not law school, so I will not tell you what that case is all about, other than to say that he often said that Smith versus Allwright was his most important case. Not Brown, but Smith, because what he understood is that democracy is the linchpin upon which all of our other rights rest. And that if we get democracy right, we have a chance to get everything else right. And so at Y Block, we say that Black ballots are Black futures, because we believe that ultimately the vote is our core mechanism for advancing Black futures. And so we organized ourselves. I was a law student when I founded the organization. We started at the grassroots level, really mobilizing in communities across the country. We worked in 2020. And then in 2022, we set out on a very ambitious mission to essentially replicate the freedom rides of the 1960s. And what we wanted to do was to harness all of the Black legal power and potential that exists across the country, and mobilize it in battleground states where Black votes were under attack. And so with the support of this tremendous organization and a number of other supporters, we were able to mobilize some 100 Black lawyers that we fully funded to travel to Georgia, to North Carolina, to Texas, to do on-the-ground voter organizing, to talk to voters about how to protect their right to vote. And then beyond that, to really have some engaged conversations about what the vote really means, right? There's a way in which sometimes voting organizations don't actually grapple with the real complexities around the vote, the real concerns, the real questions that people have about the vote and its efficacy. And we wanted to really engage that conversation in a direct way and hopefully help folks walk away with a sense that the way to fix our democracy is to engage, not disengage. And so that was our core effort. What did we learn along the way? Well, what we learned along the way is that hope and celebration and joy are tools of resistance. That there's a way in which the reactionaries in this moment want to confine us to a kind of resignation that things can never get better. That they want to strip our agency from us. And that part of the value of grounding the work that we do in hope is that hope reminds us that we have power. Hope reminds us that things can get better. And so what we tried to do along the way was dig into a deep reservoir of hope. And so on those trips that we hosted, and we were doing them consecutively, week after week after week, we were tapping into that reservoir. We were singing the songs of freedom on the buses as we were traveling to key markets. We were singing traditional songs of freedom like Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, but we were also singing new school songs of freedom, like songs from Beyonce's Renaissance album. And we wanted to make sure that our community was really tapping into the power of that hope. And the other thing that we saw along the way is that there was a kind of hope that we were able to present to communities. And so when we were knocking on doors as Black lawyers and Black law students, often what we would encounter was a sense of pride, right? A sense that, you know, the struggle has produced these young people, and these young people are back to contribute to the struggle. And that was something that we saw quite a bit along the way. And so, you know, Rachel, this might be a good point to pause and share the
Sure.
news. But we took a ride down to Augusta. We flew into Atlanta. We did organizing work in Atlanta, and then we went down to Augusta because often some of the smaller markets in these states don't get attention from voting organizations. So we went down to Augusta. We did some organizing work, and we've got a little bit of that to show you right now.
Great.
Now, dozens of law far as Texas and DC came to our area this weekend to reach out for support with Black voters. Their goal is to make sure our community can practice their right to vote at polling sites. Our Sydney Hood is here in the studio tonight to explain why they're here in Richmond County compared to larger ones.
Craig, for the Young Black Lawyers Organizing Coalition, or YBLOC, it's all about getting as many registered voters out to the polls as possible. They have an ambitious goal of canvassing 300 to 500 doors a day, and with Black voters being the biggest demographic of early voters right here in Richmond County, they want to make sure no stone is left unturned for the Peach State. Power to the ballot! The chant heard around the voting polls, shouted with purpose.
We've been calling this tour the Modern Day Freedom Rides. And we want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to give back and serve our communities.
It's a nonpartisan team of nearly 100 lawyers.
You advocate for who does matter. I feel like they don't have a voice. It's good to hear conversations like that and try to give them information so they know that, no, actually your vote does count.
Hey everybody, we are here in Georgia.
Abdul Dasumu created YBLOC 3 years ago, looking to exceed Black voter turnout numbers.
In our communities, helping to get out the vote. And we're knocking on doors and we're talking to voters directly. We've been in Black churches doing education workshops for Black voters, providing them with resources like the Election Protection Hotline.
A nationwide effort, mobilizing and helping Black voters make their voices heard.
That we were reaching into every corner of the state of Georgia and talking to as many Black voters as we could about how to protect their rights in this election.
And despite political affiliation, their main cause is to educate and protect Black voters heading into Tuesday.
Fantastic.
So the other thing that we learned along the way is that hope is a source of creativity. So Dr. King talks a lot about this in some of his sermons. He gives a sermon at the end of the 1950s where he talks about hope as a source of creative energy and dynamic will. And part of what we wanted to demonstrate in this moment is that our communities are determined through that sort of dynamic will and creative energy to resist and overcome the barriers that are being thrown in our faces. And so we were able to really, we believe, innovate a new model of election protection and voter protection, not simply working from the top down, but rather working from the bottom up, talking directly to voters about how to protect their right to vote, going into Black churches, but also hosting block parties, going to HBCU homecomings, really getting into the heart of the community and meeting people exactly where they are with critical voter protection information. And then the final lesson that we learned along the way is that you've got to make it personal. that ultimately what you have to do is convince people that they have something at stake in this process. And the truth of the matter is that, frankly, there are so many messages that are aiming to convince them otherwise. And so part of what we wanted to do was really get on the ground and talk to people. We had so many conversations with people who, were skeptical about the vote. And one of the things that we said often, that I say often, is that Gil Scott-Heron said the revolution will not be televised, but it's going to have to be legislated. And at some point, it's going to impact your day-to-day life. And so we were talking to one young voter, couldn't have been older than 20, who was skeptical. And we asked him, we said, hey, why are you going to vote in the upcoming election? He said, no, I don't really have any plans to. I don't really believe in the process, don't really believe in that. And we just started having a conversation. We must have had a 20, 30-minute conversation with him. And over the course of the conversation, what we learned is that, we started with, okay, well, we see you've got a car there. Are you paying insurance on that car? And he said, yeah, I do. He was kind of confused, like some of you are. And we said, well, actually, there's an insurance commissioner on the ballot in this election. You know who sets your rates? How do you feel about your rates? Well, I'm paying way too much. Well, you might want to look at who's on the ballot in terms of that insurance commissioner race and really see how it impacts your day-to-day life. And that's just one small example of the ways in which we were able to engage these conversations along the way. And what we learned is that sometimes when you knock on a door and you really present yourself with a genuine desire to learn and understand and support people, and people are willing to talk to you. And we didn't stop those conversations because we had to get to the next door. We stayed there and we had the conversation. And, we believe we were able to move people in some inspiring and impactful ways. And so our core lessons are: make sure that you center hope and celebration and joy as tools of resistance. There are so many ways in which this moment aims to undermine our sense of agency, and reclaiming our hope and our joy is a way to reclaim our agency. And then make it personal. Make sure you're talking to people about what really matters and why it's important to their day-to-day lives. It's not enough to encourage people to go out and vote. You have to make sure that you talk to people about how the vote is going to actually improve their lives. And then we have to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that that vote actually improves people's lives. That's it. That's all I've got.
I see clapping. Thank you so much, Abdul. I personally could just listen to you talk forever, because everything you say, like, we're jotting down to quote you later. It's really beautiful. Thank you so much. And if anyone has questions for Abdul, feel free to put them in the chat. And then for now, we're going to move on to two other takeaways from last year, which are using mystery, whimsy, and surprise, and evaluate and refine. So we're going to hear from Becky and Andrew of Democracy about their Texarcism campaign. And I'm just going to shout out the Democracy shirt that I'm wearing. I match with Becky today. So yay, but please take it away.
Amazing. Thank you, Crystal. It makes me so happy when I see people in my shirts. So just to tell you a little bit more about Democracy. I started Democracy in late 2021, and usually it's just me. Oh, well, they're available on my website, democracy.com, Carlene, if you would like to buy one. Sorry, just had, got to fund this activism somehow. And usually it's just me. So it was really incredible to have the collaboration and support of both Andrew Dinwiddie, who is my partner on this project, and the center. So I just appreciate y'all so much. My work was made so much better through all the stuff that I learned in this program and just your enthusiasm and support. So thank you. So a little bit more about Texarcism. It was a nonpartisan relational organizing program that we used to get progressive Texans to encourage their circles to get out and vote and have the tools that they needed to do that. We reached people a variety of different ways, but we really spent most of our energy and resources on a big in-person event in Austin, Texas, the Texarcism event, and we also used social media, small gatherings, and placement in a partner nonprofit's blog and newsletter. These were our panelists and participants in our in-person event. We had a comedian moderating a panel of abortion rights experts. We had a scribe doing live artistry capturing the event. We had an astrologer who did a birth chart reading of the state of Texas. And we also had a feminist video collection and a mystical election ritual, which we'll get to in a minute. But generally, my philosophy with any Democrasexy event is to make civic engagement irresistible. So I want people to come because it sounds like a fun party, not regardless of if they consider themselves politically active or an activist or anything like that. I just want to draw people in. And as you can see, people loved the event.
So this was an event, the Texarcism was an event that originally Becky had done in 2021, and we decided that it made sense to build on what she had done then, and to redo the event, a version of the event, and then also build a larger campaign using some of the kind of imagery and kind of with that inspiration. And we were inspired in part by the confluence of election season with Halloween, a recognition of a growing niche of people like progressive folks who are also interested in a full array of traditionally feminine identified sources of knowledge and power. And by the historical labeling as witches of anyone who's working to smash the patriarchy, as the patriarchy so needs to be smashed in Texas, in one particular place. And so we built this whole campaign around this witchy symbolism and messaging to cast the demons out of the Texas state capitol, which is a C3 statement, by the way. And Becky, to explain the ceremony.
Yeah, so our Texarcism ritual was about a 15-minute ceremony, witchy ceremony, where we guided people to, and you can kind of see, I would always wear this like elaborate headpiece, which I think immediately, and like spooky outfit, and I think that immediately kind of disarms people, because when you're asking people, costumes always are useful. We're asking people to kind of go deep in the ceremony. And so I think it helped disarm folks that I was like a little bit ridiculous, so that they didn't have to feel ridiculous doing what we were asking them to do. So in this ceremony, we asked people to write down things that they hope to exercise from the state of Texas, things that they wanted to manifest in the lives of their fellow Texans, a coven of supporters to help them in the vulnerable process of talking with folks about voting in Texas, and then a pentacle of people you can see here on the right. We had people, a pentacle is like a symbol of protection. And so we had people write down folks in their life who all aspects of their life who they were going to reach out to about the election. And so we were offering them protection, but also we were having them like make a concrete plan for who they were going to talk to. I always opened the ceremony by inviting in the spirits of Texas ancestors who had worked for good in the past, as well as connecting with future Texans who would benefit from our work on the election now. And I think this was one of the most resonant parts of the ceremony. It really moved people and helped people center themselves in history in a way that I think we don't always do.
And I think, right, to Abdul's point earlier, like also that inspired, I think, a lot of hope in folks who are feeling pretty hopeless in Texas. At the close of the ceremony, we had folks burn the list of things that they wanted to exercise from the lives of Texans or from Texas politics, which was this element of kind of surprise that everyone, I think, found very cathartic and fun. So our intention following the ceremony was to communicate with the participants through a texting platform and give them information, tips, encouragement that would help them then turn out their friends to vote. And our goal was to recruit, using witchy numbers all along here, 1,111 participants who would then influence 9,999 people to actually go out and vote, high opportunity voters.
However, now we're getting to the evaluate and refine portion of the presentation. We realized that our primary tool that we had intended to use for recruiting participants, co-hosted Instagram live versions of the ceremony, it wasn't getting the traction that we had hoped. People who did the ceremony that way and at our big live event weren't necessarily signing up for text. We wanted those 1,111 people to text, and in the end we had 27.
And it was too late to then, like, because we were seeing that, for example, Becky went to a book club and did the ceremony with a book club, and 100% of those people signed up. So we should have known, like, our performer selves should have remembered that live performance is always the strongest. However, it was kind of too late to refocus at that time. And so because the Instagram was getting so much traction, we pivoted and focused all of our attention on educating and encouraging voters and getting them to turn out other voters on that platform.
I will say that the conversations that I was having with folks at the live event, at the book club, all of that informed the content that I was creating for Instagram. So I was addressing real concerns that people had based on my in-person human interactions with them. And I think that is what helped that content be so successful. Also, I didn't say this before, but my background's in advertising. So I spent most of my career working in advertising as a brand strategist and copywriter. And so now I'm just applying all those skills to sell democracy instead of laptops. I have some, based on that pivot to sharing information via Instagram versus the texting platform, we have some hard data to share with you. So in that 30-day period leading up to the election, this content that I was putting out that was, very shame-free, very clear, very addressing like actual needs that people had in terms of lack of civic education, reached 10 times more than is typical for my content. So that was very encouraging. And people were sharing it. So that number of accounts that was sharing content is much more than my my following. So it was reaching far beyond those who I normally reach. And I increased my Instagram following by 35% in that time period, which was big for me. And then we also did a survey after our election efforts, and 97% of people said that information from Democracy was useful in talking to folks about voting. The other 3% just didn't find us in time, so would have been 100, I think. Of the people who did our survey, 21% had done the ritual. 100% of those people who did the ritual said that they would do it again, and people who responded to the survey said that they thought they had gotten between 4 to 7 people on average to vote, which we felt good about.
Should feel good about all of it. It was a wonderful campaign that was useful for people in Texas, and that information was great for me in New York too, and to share with my friends. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we're going to move on to our next our final pair, Janine and Aileen of Fair Count. If you have any questions for Becky and Andrew, feel free to put them in the chat. But now we'll hear from Janine and Aileen about creating irresistible imagery and making actions youth-friendly.
Awesome. Aileen, I can start by teeing you up with just the information about Vote 365. So So Fair Count, we're based in Atlanta. We do national work, but in 2021, we actually launched our Vote 365 program or initiative. And this was launched on November 8th, 2021, a full 365 days before polls closed last year. And we were targeting across and this is a Georgia specific program, we were targeting 1.3 million Black, Latinx, and Native American voters outside of Metro Atlanta. So Georgia has about 150, or has exactly 159 counties. We targeted 149 of those. And our entire universe was about 1.5 or 1.3 million eligible voters, with a focus particularly on low propensity, but I love when Andrew said it, high opportunity voters. So really trying to go into those, especially rural communities that don't get a lot of attention during elections, that aren't in these metropolitan areas. We're talking like going down dirt roads to meet people where they are. And so over the year, we engaged that entire universe. We ended up collecting over 30,000 commit to vote cards. We hosted over 300 events. And and remember, part of this was while we were still like really locked down during pandemic and 2021, beginning of 2022. But around September of 2022, we decided, and you can see it right there, to launch our Here to Stay bus tour. So this bus tour went to over 40 counties in our universe, in our universe in Georgia. As you can see, it's a very big, bright, a lovely bus with all kinds of stuff on the other side. And we took this bus to different communities and we hosted all kinds of events. They were cookouts, they were crab boils. We did community events with churches, with local partners, everything that you can think of. But the key part, and this is where I'm going to kick it over to Aileen, is that we knew with everything going on in the state of Georgia, we knew with the communities and the types of voters that we were trying to get out to vote, to make sure that their voices were heard, that we had to be creative. We had this lovely creative bus, but that couldn't be the only thing to get people out and to get people to ask questions and to get people engaged. So what better way to get people to say what's going on over here is to go big or go home. And I'm going to kick it over to Aileen to tell you about Wiley the whale.
Okay. So yeah, the whale idea, I don't know, I just had this kind of romance with whales. But I was kind of like thinking about the most disarming things you could possibly imagine. And I thought, well, a flying whale in rural Georgia, because no one really expects to see that. And I mean, it immediately disarms people. And there's kind of a, and like I think people are more open to asking questions and kind of hearing what's going on. And it's right. But there's like, it's like a little bit of a celebration too, because like we're bringing flying whales to you because you guys are amazing and awesome and you count. And so it's all along, it's part of our mission where we like to organize around joy. But yeah, so the whale thing was, that was really interesting. We got it up like a few times. And when we couldn't get it up because there's like a lot of like power lines or trees nearby and I didn't want to take down the electricity in that town, I would just inflate it with a little fan in the mouth and then put weights inside it. And eventually I started kind of like, asking the kids if they wanted to get their picture taken in the belly of the whale. So we'd unzip the back and kind of sneak them in the back really quick and snap their photos. So there's like very interactive, but they loved it. We also had like little whale medals that said you count and talked about voting. We had like little coloring stations and kites that also featured Wiley. And the idea was that like, even when we left that county, on a good windy day, there's always a kite somewhere in Georgia up in the air that says vote and it says you count. And it really was it was about uplifting those communities and kind of like having a great deal of fun with them, but also like I don't know, starting them young, you know, where it's just kind of like, you know, you get a little vote kite and you've been having fun with that. You got to see a whale and voting time comes along and it's just like, hey, so we're going to go vote, right? And the parents are like, what are you talking about? And it's just like, well, you haven't voted yet. And the kids are as invested. And it, you know, kind of instills the idea of this being a family event, a family thing that you do together. I know people that bring their kids with them to vote, and it is their thing that they do. Where it's just like it's instilling the idea of civic engagement at a young age. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that the whales were kind of good in doing is like, as we were doing these really big kind of cookouts and everything, it was something that kept the kids' attention because it's specifically for them, you know, in a lot of ways. And so it's like something for them. It's something that is absolutely in tune with them. And so they're engaged, they're having fun with the whale, with me. And the parents could just, you know, relax and stay longer and kind of chat with the organizers and talk about voting. Cause like in every stop, we have organizers that we work with that live in the communities that we serve. So they are from those areas. They know keenly what's going on in those areas, like what some of the infrastructure problems are, or you know, some of the if there's like a massive food insecurity in certain areas, they're aware of it, and they're aware of all of any kind of the partnerships that are reaching out to help curb that on in any shape, matter, or form. But they are basically running these events and offering information on voting. If any legislation has changed or whatever, you know, or deadlines, we can talk about that. We can talk about why people are. Actually, a couple of you actually already addressed this, but like talking to people about why they don't want to vote, and being able to hear them out and meet them where they are, you know. It's like, so yeah, I mean, like the adults felt more comfortable just hanging out and like having longer conversations about that and engaging in a more meaningful way. And it's I don't know, it made for a really great environment, but it's also, what I liked about it is I got to see so much of Georgia in this last year. But to see like some of these communities, we have had organizers building relationships there since 2019, and seeing how that's grown, and the amount of trust that has been given, and that we hope to keep and earn, you know, more of. It's inspiring. It's really inspiring. Like all of the work, we like to think of ourselves as non-extractive. When we go into a community, it's like we are literally there to stay. We want to know everything that's happening. If anything untoward, like a storm hits, or like, you know, like something that's a little bit out of the ordinary hits, we might be one of the many organizations that they decide to call first and say, hey, you know, we need some help here, or we need to talk about this. And so I don't know. I think the whale was kind of part of that, where it's just like, we're just there celebrating folks. And you know, I mean, because it's been a contentious time. So maybe what you need is a little bit of absurdity and a little bit of earnestness and a little bit of romance and hope. So I don't know. That's where that came from.
Well, I'll just say one more thing about if you look at this particular picture. So we talked about the kites and the magnets that the kids had and the medals. But if you look at the picture with the grown-ups with the hats on, so Aileen had captain's hats for everybody, and really for the kids. I went to over half of the bus stops, all right? And I can tell you that most of the time, it was grown people who were like, what do I have to do to get one of those hats? And so, you know, like, we'd be like, well, have you filled out a commit to vote card? And then, like, and so they're like, oh, okay, just so they could get these hats. And it was, and we had, I witnessed not just the children, but the adults coming over and being like, why you got this whale out here? Well, do you want to know more about voting, sir? Like, that's the way that we really, but it was a lot. It was for the kids, really focused, targeting the kids. But in those communities, it was just something for everybody. I'm just so proud of Aileen for the work that she was able to do and that creativity and how it really made an impact in this state. And so, yes, super job, super great job.
Thank you so much. I love, we all have that childlike wonder somewhere within us, and so many of our panelists were able to activate that. So here again is a little recap of the major takeaways that folks talked about. And now I'd love to bring all of the panelists in for a little group conversation. And maybe we can start by sharing how you're applying these ideas to your work this year and what you're working on now and looking for this year and also ahead to 2024. Anyone wants to start?
I can start.
Great.
We are continuing Vote 365 in our off year, because it's really not an off year. And it's also an opportunity for us, just like Abdul was saying, like there's a lot of voter education that needs to happen. Really, like, you're talking about, insurance commissioners, but the same thing. When I would stop at bus tours or stops on the bus tour, people would ask me, well, why are the roads raggedy? How do and we actually had a pamphlet with every single elected official, one-liner about what they do, and then 3 to 5 bullet points about how it impacts your daily life. And so I would say, well, if you're worried about the raggedy roads, you need to focus on your county commissioner. You need to focus on your state representative. And a lot more of that has to be done. And while this is an off year, this is the time that we need to be doing that work. And the other thing that I love about Wiley is that it's not just for voting, right? So if I pull up with a 90-foot whale in your community and you ask me about it, I can talk to you about voting. I can also talk to you about redistricting. I can talk to you about the census. I can talk to you about our democracy in general. And so I am looking forward, like, this is a lifelong investment in this whale. So like, I am really looking forward to, using Wiley to get people engaged year round, ahead of 2024 and beyond.
That's wonderful, thanks. Becky and Andrew, I know you also did a lot of voter education along the same lines, and Abdul, you already talked about that. Is there anything specific you're focused on right now and coming up?
Yeah, yes. So my 2 biggest takeaways from our work on this past election were the tremendous amount of civic education that needs to be done. So like, that is a big focus of mine. And also another takeaway that I had was here in Texas, there are tremendous systemic barriers to civic engagement. And I think they are also accompanied by emotional and psychological barriers that folks that's not really being adequately addressed. So I am really focused going forward on all the ways that I can address those barriers. So taking the lesson of how meaningful it was for people to hear about, the ancestors who came before in our work in Texas. I'm kind of like really going all in on that this year. And actually on Monday, I am doing a Galentine's Day Texas Foremothers tour at the Texas State Cemetery, where I will take people on a tour of Ann Richards' grave, Barbara Jordan's grave, Sarah Weddington's grave, talk about their stories, and hopefully people will walk away with lessons from their lives that they can apply to the work that we're trying to do now, and also just some of that hope and connecting to a greater arc of history than just we see today. Also, of course, it's going to be witchy, so people get a crystal and there will be some tarot reading while we're at it. So
amazing. We're all very excited about it. And Abdul, any updates on your focus right now and coming up?
Absolutely. Well, we do have a couple of major Supreme Court cases that we're monitoring, and I'm sure many of us are, around redistricting, and also for our community of Black lawyers and law students around affirmative action. And so we're going to be doing some sort of agenda setting and doing some advocacy around both of those issues. But our core focus this year is really what everyone else has said. It's making sure that we're not waiting until 2024 to engage our communities, that the fight is really happening right now. And that if we wait until then, we've already missed out. We've already lost some of the battle. And so what we're planning to do is to scale the tour to really start this year to engage many more lawyers and law students. But what we want to do is actually, instead of having sort of each, tour stop be its own kind of distinct thing, we want to actually remain in conversation with the same voters over time. And so what we're doing is building out the mechanism, the infrastructure to be able to do that, so that we're touching base with them, starting sometime later this year. And we're running that conversation across all of our tours all the way through November and beyond, because it's not enough to do the single touch point. And it's not enough to, just hope that ultimately they vote. We want to make sure that we're in conversation with them and we're engaged in their lives in some way, so that hopefully that inspires them to be part of the process.
Fantastic. Great.
Great. Thank you all so much. And we have another question that we really want to hear from all of you about. What advice would you give a group planning their campaigns for the coming 2 years, based on everything you've learned?
Be flexible. I think you do. I think like if you're going to experiment there, you need to be flexible. And Aileen, I'm chime in, but like Aileen said, and we couldn't fly the kite everywhere, or we would like shut down entire communities. And sometimes there wasn't any wind, and Aileen could have been like, well, shoot, can't bring out the whale today. But she was flexible and then created an entirely new experience. Like we're Jonahing like these kids, shoving in the belly of this whale, and it was fun. And so it's just like, you have to be flexible, you have to be creative, but you can't be afraid of experimenting.
And I think that this kind of goes to the core of like, and I don't want to speak for C4AA, but like one of the things that I picked up that, and I do this a lot with my art too, is that being willing to make big mistakes, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, where you're constantly kind of reflecting on what it is you're doing and how can you make it better? How can you make it more impactful? Even if you're in the middle of, a campaign, you're constantly going, taking notes on it and saying, okay, so maybe if I do this one thing, like move the podium to the left or whatever, that will actually engage more people, and being willing to kind of constantly perfect and work it, and know that the work's never done. Nothing's ever really perfect. And I did that. So.
Great. Andrew, Abdul, what are you thinking? Yeah.
I would add, like to Aileen's point that, and for folks who don't know, the C4AA has an amazing, very rigorous program of how to go about this work. And it was incredibly useful to us. And I think Becky and I were like, we're like, wow, we're doing so much prototyping. And then every time that we hit like a wall, we were like, we didn't prototype that early enough. We didn't prototype that often enough. So so that is something that I'm definitely taking into all of my life, actually, and teaching my kid about, like, prototype. So that was really brilliant and really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to tack onto that, like, yes, I in my life felt like things had to be perfect before I put them out into the world. And this program really taught me that there is no such thing as perfection. And like the more that you just try stuff and iterate, like the better it will be. And so thank you for that lesson.
Thanks.
Two things I would say. One,
I was like, I know you're going to say something.
I know you got something. So just to reiterate what's already been said, it's already been said, but not everyone has said it. So I'll say it again, that you have to start where you are. And you might not think you have everything you need, but you have something in your hand. And recognize the value of what you have in your hand. I mean, when we started Y Block, I had absolutely no money. And absolutely really no relationships to draw on in these key communities. We simply said, we want to do something. We want to make a difference. We want to contribute. And we started organizing. And so I would say, start where you are, recognize what's in your hand, and then don't be afraid of difficult conversations. This work is, it exists in a frame, right? I often say that if we are successful in this generation in creating a truly inclusive democracy in America, it will be the first time that we have had a truly inclusive democracy in America. And so that's hard work. People do not get to the point of disengagement and disconnection from the process just because. Right? They get to that point because there are systems in place that have made it difficult and discouraged folks. And so don't be afraid to engage that conversation with voters. As I'm thinking about like the insurance commissioner conversation, right? Like that was actually two conversations as I'm remembering it correctly. It was like two people who were like, hey, I'm paying way too much in insurance. But we were able to use that as a window to actually engage a broader conversation with them. And so just don't be afraid of the difficult conversations. You're going to confront them. Speak honestly to voters. Recognize that in many ways the system has failed them, but that the way to fix that is not to disengage, but to engage. And start with what's in your hand.
Thank you so much, all of you. What a lovely final set of thoughts. We just have a few other things to share that we want to work with all of you. And we have this Unstoppable Voters Fellowship, and Andrew and Aileen were fellows. Abdul and Becky were in a slightly different program, but it's very similar. And applications are open now. And the fellowship is a special professional development program for leaders in US voting activism. It has a bunch of helpful components, including we start with a training retreat where we all come together in an idyllic setting and get to know each other and work together and learn all about artistic activism. And then it continues with additional workshops and mentorship and individual support. And through the fellowship, you'll join this vibrant community, like all the people who you heard from today, of the most innovative, inspiring voting activists. And the fellowship runs from May through December this year, and fellows get a stipend of $5,000 for their time. So applications are open now through the end of this month, through March 1st. And if you want to learn more, we'll have a link for you if it's not already there. And it is. And we're also holding an info session in about 2 weeks on February 22nd. So you can come and learn more then. Thank you all so much for your insights and your questions and for joining us. Again, we'll send some wrap-up materials to you so that you can keep thinking about all of this moving forward. And hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Good time, vote for that. 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 Good time, vote for that.
I got that feeling, the feeling too easy. As long as I'm breathing, I gotta vote for a good time. Tag your name across the sky. Breathe it in and we can fly. Love for love and not for likes. Yeah, so let's vote like you just got paid. Spent it all on Mary Jane. It's a celebration. Yeah, so I